Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the I've Been Falsely Accused radio show. I'm your host, Cogee, with my main man, Mr. Jeffrey Deskovic. Jeffrey, how you doing today, sir?
I'm great, Cogee. How are you?
I'm doing all right. We back again, Jeffrey. What you think about today's show?
I'm excited. Today we're going to, as you know, we're primarily focused on, false accusations, but, occasionally we do delve a little bit into other criminal justice issues, which also, while not dealing with innocence directly, may have to do with just justice in general. So I'm really excited about Sheila Rule joining with us today, and I think it's going to be a great show.
Oh, that's right, definitely. You know what, Jeffrey? This is part 21 we're doing right now. What would you want to say about other shows leading up to part 21? Do you feel like we've been doing a good job? Do you feel like that we hitting it on the nail, or do you feel like we've been missing something?
No, I think that we're doing good. It's hard to believe that the time passed by quite that fast. As you know, we do this show a couple times a month, so 21 is a pretty big number when you think about this is not a weekly production. So hard to believe that we've come this far, and the show has evolved a little bit, and we've tried different things, and as you know, we're always looking to get better and add things. So I'm pretty excited where we are, but more importantly, I'm looking forward to where we're going in the future.
Okay, there it is. Definitely, you're definitely right about that. Now, Jeffrey, I want to come to you again, so I'm gonna get your mic hot today. So I want you to get ready, okay?
Absolutely, Coach.
All right.
You feed me the ball and just give me a couple of layups, and then I'll start knocking down the jumpers from behind the 3-point line.
Oh man, I got you today, definitely. Now let me ask you, Jeffrey, before we get started, about Miss Sheila Rule. Why is she needed in the community, and why should people support her movement?
She's needed because, firstly, the subject of parole. It's not something that's generally on the public consciousness. I mean, the primary beneficiaries of it, the parolees themselves, people who are incarcerated, rightfully, who may have spent quite a bit of time rehabilitating themselves. They're ready for a second chance back in society, and but it's easy for the public and for the politicians to not care or even be hostile towards the prisoners because, they're prisoners, right? They're criminals, right?
That's right.
That's so the thinking goes. Let's just lock them up and throw away the key. It's an easy plank to run and get elected on and get reelected on and get legislation through. So in that sense, it's a population that is really underserved. Secondarily, you have families, the children who are waiting for their mothers or fathers to come back home, the parents who, in a lot of ways, are locked up just like people who are incarcerated. So Sheila is a real big mover and shaker in the parole reform movement, having put together the coalition where she's not just working on her own nonprofit organization, Think Outside the Cell, but has also been really instrumental in putting together like a coalition around the area of parole. And, community organizing is a skill set. It's not quite the same thing as just being an advocate doing media, legislation, and speaking, but it's kind of a skill. You've got to bring other people in the tent and keep them happy and arrive at a consensus. It's a job in and of itself. I'll tell you, Coach, it's not a skill really that I have. And so she kind of fills that void. And then, the post-incarceration stigmatization. If we're saying that we want people to transition to crime-free lives once they're released back from prison, then that means that we got to, as a society, we got to open up doors. We got to give them a chance to obtain gainful employment. But often that stigma is the post-incarceration stigma. It prevents people, employers, owners, managers, decision-makers, gatekeepers. They often don't want to give otherwise qualified people an opportunity, And so Sheila fills that vacuum that there is, and so that's why she's important.
Okay, there it is. Way to break it down, Jeff. Way to break it down. I mean, you definitely broke it down. And let me tell you something. You definitely got me ready for this interview. You know what I'm saying? So what we're going to do, we're going to take a break. And I want everybody to stay locked in and tuned in. And y'all know my motto. If you change the station, you are a part of the problem. And I mean that because, number one, what we got going on today, it don't make no sense. People are getting put away. And I'm telling you, just mass amount of people are getting put away. So I want y'all to stay locked in and stay tuned in, and we're going to have a great show today. We'll be right back. Hey, we back, everybody. We back. Hey, and you know today, title of the show, we definitely trying to bring them back home. We trying to bring them back home with great guests. We're trying to bring them back home with great information, but we definitely trying to bring them back home to love. And that's why we got Miss Sheila Rule, who's in with us today. Miss Sheila Rule, how you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. You know, I just want to tell you, I'm a fan of your work, and I like how you getting down and how you definitely keeping that fire on this whole situation.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me today.
It's been a pleasure. And Jeffrey, what would you like to say?
Welcome, Sheila. We meet again, and yet another aspect of working together, and looking forward to you sharing some information, with the audience who don't typically get information on parole. It's one thing for me to share information or Cogee to speak on issues, but it's important to bring in other voices, as an added layer of credibility. So excited about what you have to bring today.
Thank you. Thanks. Always a pleasure to work with you, Jeffrey, always. So thank you.
And you know what? I was going to ask you real quick, Ms. Rule, what's it like working with Jeffrey? Now I know because I work with him all the time, but for anybody else who don't know, what is it like being a part of, Jeffrey's movement as well as him, contributing to yours?
I'd say the thing that I appreciate most about Jeffrey is that he is about serious business. And he follows through.
That's right.
So often you find people who are well-meaning, they have good ideas, but then you can't find them. You know where Jeffrey is.
He's
that's hard right. At work. And I just can't tell you how appreciative I am, because this is hard work.
Yes, ma'am.
And to have people who are serious and who care about it and who are about completion, it's gold.
Yes, ma'am. You definitely right about that, because believe me, there's a whole lot of seats with dust on them in here where I'm at right now. It's straight. You can smack these seats and it'd be dust coming up. You know what I'm saying? But you know what? Now, one thing I can say, Miss Rule, and this is the truth. I don't get mad at people, for when they don't stay on with this fight, because this fight ain't for everybody. Am I right or wrong?
That is so right. That is so right. It's not for everybody.
Right. And I look at it like, and then you have the other, brand of people who fight for less. You know what I'm saying? I ain't trying to, I say all the time, and it's no disrespect to animal lovers, but I watch people go all out for animals. And I watch people let life just get, just snuffed away over in real life with humans. You know what I'm saying? And that's what I don't understand. That's something that's been so hard for me to deal with, doing on this journey, is that there are really innocent people that are being put away just on mistaken identities, just on somebody is just too tired to really look at who's standing there and just feel like they want to get it over with and just say that person. Okay, yeah, that person. Then we have the corrupt system where people are just pointing people out saying, you know what, it's that person right there. Just say that and we'll move on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what's your take on that? Get it done with. Get it done.
That's right. Yeah. There is so much, not only corruption, but I would say even if we don't go to that extreme, there is a lot of it's all about me and my fellow man be damned, and that I think is something that we all need to take a look at. How we treat others, and how we, and what level of compassion we're willing to demonstrate. So I think it's it's something that we all kind of have to take ownership of. And when it comes to those dusty seats, I don't have judgment either, but I will say if you say you're in it, then be in it.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. But you know what? Some of us got to be built to walk alone, though, and that's what I'm built to do. And I didn't already made up in my mind. I mean, it is what it is. This is what I was born to do. At least I'm putting my energies into something that's right, where I'm taking up for people. I'm not a part of the problem. I'm part of the solution.
That's right. And I think that whether we are on this road alone or with other people, I'm always guided by my favorite quotation, and that's Arthur Ashe, the great tennis player. He had this quotation which just really inspires me every day and keeps me moving, whether I'm in a movement of one or if I'm in a movement of a great number of people, because this is hard work. And what Arthur Ashe said was, he framed it as how to achieve greatness. And this is the quote: "Start where you are, use what you have, do what you can."
That's right.
That's simple. So that a movement of one or a movement of many, if you just do what you can, start where you are, use what you have, do what you can every day, you'll get there.
That's right. You're definitely right about that.
Yeah.
You definitely hit that on the nose. You know what? I want to ask you a question real quick, because I think a lot of our listeners really don't understand this, and I know you're going to break this down for me. Mm-hmm. Tell us about writing letters to incarcerated people. Why is it very important, and what role, can our listeners play in that? Can you break that down, please?
Yeah, oh, sure. In fact, that's how I started on my journey. About 13 years ago, I joined the prison ministry of the Riverside Church in New York City, where I live, and because I was a journalist, they asked me if I would respond to letters that they received from incarcerated people, and I, of course, agreed to do that. Mm-hmm. And what was revealed to me through these letters was so much talent and beauty and skill behind prison walls, so that I really saw the benefit not only for people who are incarcerated to receive letters, but for me and others like me to receive their letters, because it really just spoke to, those letters really spoke to me about what's hidden from us behind prison walls, and all the capabilities that and all the potential that we all need to consider ourselves stakeholders in, so that, and I've heard from people inside repeatedly who receive letters from people on the outside. What they say over and over again is that those letters keep them in touch with not only the world, but with their very own humanity. It allows them to I would say, exercise places in their hearts that they don't often get a chance to visit or exercise behind prison walls. Mm-hmm. That it is a beautiful experience on both ends for those who are incarcerated and for those who are on the outside. As these letters go back and forth and back and forth, it opens up new worlds of opportunities for both. So that I would say for people who are on the outside, particularly those of us who are really kind of in this rat race that we call life, we too often are not in touch with a greater purpose or a deep and abiding reason as to why we're on this earth, why we're here.
Yes, ma'am.
And I think that those letters really touch you in places that can surprise you. So I'd encourage listeners to really look into how they can get involved with prison correspondence programs. They can, for example, they could go to local churches and find out which churches have prison ministries. They could contact reentry organizations in their city or town that work with people who've been in prison, and they can find out from them where they might get involved with these correspondence programs. They might even contact the Department of Corrections in their state, that maybe the Community Outreach or Public Affairs Department in the Department of Corrections, and ask about correspondence programs, because they really can make a difference, can really have a beautiful impact in a life.
Wow. Yes, ma'am. You're definitely right about that. And you definitely broke it down. And see, the thing about it is a lot of people feel like, oh, well, if I write somebody in there, they just writing jailhouse, just jailhouse stuff. They just saying stuff because they in there. They really don't mean it. I mean, you hear a lot of people say that. Am I right or wrong?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think what you hear is not only that people have that bias, but generally they stigmatize this population. So
Right.
they dehumanize them, they stigmatize them, they marginalize them, so that they don't give them the opportunity to be human beings, when actually that's exactly what they are.
Yes, you right about that. Jeffrey, chime in.
Sure. Sheila, just to piggyback real quick, I also want to suggest another means by which people could choose to correspond. There are websites also where, prisoners place ads, they describe themselves, their hobbies and stuff, and that's another way of obtaining, names of people to correspond with. Sheila, why don't you break down what is the general state of parole, and how does Think Outside the Cell factor into that, and then the broader statewide coalition for parole reform?
Sure, absolutely. Think Outside the Cell is one of the lead organizations in New York's statewide parole reform campaign, and we got involved because this New York's parole system really unfairly and repeatedly denies parole every year to thousands of men and women who have clearly demonstrated that they're prepared to return home as contributing citizens. And these are people who are what one could call community ready, and by that we mean they are totally rehabilitated. They've transformed their thinking and their lives. They are people whose risk to public safety is low. Even according to New York State's own data, they are a population of people who are the least likely to recidivate or return to prison. They've basically done everything they were required to do, and typically much more, like starting their own organizations in prison, getting college degrees, doing volunteer work, contributing to worthy causes on the outside, and all the rest. But still, they're arbitrarily and unreasonably denied parole. So that we got involved, one, because this is crazy and it's totally unfair. But they're also because there is a direct link between parole reform and the stigma, which is what Think Outside the Cell works to eradicate, the stigma of incarceration. Because, it's our feeling, and it's the feeling of many people, that these men and women are repeatedly denied because the parole board can do it. They can do it without a lot of public outcry because the stigma that these men and women are carry the weight of makes this kind of inhumane treatment acceptable to the greater society. It becomes okay to keep people locked up, and it's okay to deny them another chance because they have been defined a certain way. They have been stereotyped and demonized. So that's we're working, as we work to reform parole, we're also working to lift this stigma and to have these men and women seen as individuals and seen as human beings.
When someone is denied parole,
Jeffrey, wait a minute, 1 second. We got to take a break and hold your question, Jeff, okay?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Cogee.
we got to go to break. Miss Sheila, we're going to go to break for 1 second, and we'll be right back. And when we come right back in, we're going to have Miss Sheila Rule. She's in with us, and she's definitely bringing it, everybody. I want y'all to get y'all pens and y'all paper and definitely get ready for a great show like we've been having, all right? When we come back in, it's going to be a greater show. It's a lot of information that Miss Rule is giving out right now. I want y'all to have this information. That's why me and Jeffrey do this show. We want to make sure that y'all are ahead of the game. We want to make sure that when things happen in your life, your friends' lives, or anybody's lives, you already have the knowledge to handle it. So that's why we do this show. So y'all stay locked in and tuned in. Quick break, and we'll be right back in with Miss Sheila Rule. We'll be right back. Hey, what's up, everybody? We back. Welcome to the I've Been Falsely Accused radio show, part 21, with me, your host, Cogee, and my main man, Mr. Jeffrey Deskovic. Jeffrey, how you doing today?
I'm great, Cogee. Hope you're having a great one as well.
Yeah, man, definitely. You know what? I'm glad that we in fighting this fight. You know what I'm saying? It's like the show takes a long time to come back for me because I'll be ready to fight on my other show days. You know what I'm saying? Definitely, because
absolutely.
You know what? Because
Cogee, it doesn't stop for either one of us in our mind, right?
Right, because I was going to say, when it's in your soul, it's in your soul. When it's in your system, it's in your system. And that's all it is to it. Now, Jeffrey, right before we went to break, you was talking to Miss Sheila Rule, who's definitely doing a great job today. Miss Sheila Rule, I want to thank you again for being on the show today.
I thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right. Now, Jeffrey, you was going to ask her a question right before we went to break. What question was that?
Yeah, when someone is denied parole, that means they have completed their sentence minimum, and then as a result of being denied, what happens to them after that, Sheila?
Once they are denied parole, they typically, generally, have to wait 2 years before going before the parole board again. And what typically happens when they're denied parole in New York State, they are given no guidance as to what they need to do in order to be released the next time, so that they will be denied parole, and in boilerplate language that says your release at this time, basically your release at this time would not be conducive to the welfare of society, something along those lines, or but then it doesn't say exactly why it wouldn't be conducive, or
Right.
And it doesn't say what the person has to do to make it the next time. So the person is in this vague world for the next 2 years. They come before the parole board again, and they may get denied again. They may get denied repeatedly, so that you'll have somebody who may say have 20 to life, 25 to life. They do 32, they do 35 years, etc., because the parole board arbitrarily denies them. Then, let's say, eventually they are released. But nothing's changed on the part of that person. In other words, the person had already done everything he or she was supposed to do. They'd gone above and beyond the call of duty. So they'd already been doing this. It just so happens that 12 years after they were eligible, or 10 years after they were eligible, or 8 years after they were eligible, somebody on the parole board says, oh, okay, let's release them now. It's crazy. It's arbitrary. It's unfair. There's nothing people can do to prepare. That's why the system is so broken. Even the New York Times had a major editorial earlier this year saying it's exactly that, New York's broken parole system.
Wow. You know what, Miss? Let me ask you something, Miss Rule. Whenever have you had any inmates say to you, Miss Rule, I went in and I asked the board, okay, y'all flopped me, y'all won't let me out. What do I need to do to get out the next time I sit in front of you guys? I mean, do the inmates take it upon themselves to ask?
Sometimes they do. Sometimes they do, and I will say the people I've talked to say that the answers are often inadequate. They will say that what they will focus on far too often is the crime, the nature of the crime, which will never change, which can never change. But meanwhile, that person has changed, so that you'll have someone who, let's say, has done 20 years and they go before the parole board. Now, this person has done 20 years. This is their chance to make their case. One of my favorite quotes is from a guy who said, I spent 20 years in prison. My parole hearing was 4 minutes. So that you don't even get that much of a chance to state your case. And when you do, when you get the opportunities, far too often, what the parole commissioners do is turn the spotlight on. Well, all those years ago, 20 years ago, when you were 20 or 21, you did this crime, and what kind of remorse do you have, and let's focus on the crime because that's so important. Yes, but the fact now is that that person has been in prison for the crime.
Yes, ma'am.
So now what happens? The person has been in prison to pay his or her, to pay back society through that time in prison, so that from here on out it should be about rehabilitation, because the person has already been punished. What the New York State Parole Board tends to view itself as is a sentencing body, which is not in its purview. It is not a sentencing body. The judge and the jury have already taken care of that. They are supposed to look at whether this person is prepared for reintegration. That's it. They're not supposed to focus on the crime. They're supposed to focus on that person's journey toward home.
Ms. Rule, how do they go by picking the board? How do they pick the board and the people to say who gets out and who don't? How are they picked?
Well, this is the governor selects the parole board commissioners. They have to be approved by the New York State Senate. And what has tended to happen is that the board is heavy with law enforcement types. So you've got former DAs, you've got other people who've been in law enforcement. You don't have as many people who say are involved in the behavioral sciences or in other careers. It's more law enforcement, and clearly they have a certain view, or they view these men and women through a certain specific prism. So it makes it even more difficult. And often it's so that the state Senate has traditionally been led by conservative Republicans who also view these men and women a certain way. So it makes it very, very difficult. But the governor has great say in who gets on the board. And one of the things we've been pushing for is to have more community people on the board. These are the people who will be receiving men and women who do ultimately return home. Have people who live in those impacted communities. They should have some say as well. Have people who have a sense of behavior and the evolution of a human being, so that it's not all about law enforcement.
That's right. You're right about that. Now, let me ask you another question. If me, you, and Jeffrey wanted to be a part of the board, what do we have to do, and what do the community have to do to try to be a part of the board, parole board?
Well, for one thing, we'd have to get we'd have to have our names submitted, and that is not that difficult to do. The governor is always accepting names now, but the issue is once it's vetted, who's vetting it and who finally makes that final cut. That's the harder part.
So, like, if me, you, and Jeffrey got on the board and we all voted that we want this person to be out, it still comes to this one certain person that says, okay, let him go, right?
Well, it's usually the parole board is going to be, let's say, 3 people, and so a majority rule. So if 2 people say the person should be released, then that person gets to go home. But I think even more, in New York's parole system, there needs to be a change so that whether or not you're released doesn't depend on which parole commissioners you get. Right. There needs to be evidence-based criteria, objective criteria, so that the board needs to follow that criteria, so that if you make it, if you have a low risk, if you've done all these other things, if they check off that checklist, this person has done all these things, then that person needs to be released. It shouldn't be, it's almost like rolling the dice. It's like, oh, I got, my parole board commissioner, the ones who heard me were, Jeffrey Deskovic and Sheila Rule. They let me go home. Meanwhile, my buddy over here got Mary McGillicuddy and Bob Stevens. Those parole board commissioners are really tough. They don't like people who are incarcerated, so my buddy didn't get to go home. Instead of having criteria that says he's done this, that's 30 points. He's done this, that's excellent. He's done this.
Right.
Okay, according to all those criteria, he gets to go home.
Right.
End of story.
And Ms. Rule, it goes back to what you said, too, also. You know what? I'll hold this question. We got to take another quick break. I'm going to hold this question, and when we come back, I want to ask you a question about once the person done everything they can do in jail, I don't want you to answer it, and then they get flopped where they go back and they won't, release them, what more is it left to do? You know what I'm saying? That's when trouble is set up for that person. And I want you to answer when we come right back, okay?
Okay.
Quick break, and we'll be right back. Everybody, you're listening to the I've Been Falsely Accused radio show with me, your host, Cogee, and my main man, Mr. Jeffrey Deskovic. And we got Miss Sheila Rule in right now, who's definitely bringing it. So I want y'all to stay locked in and stay tuned in, and we'll be right back. It's a quick break, and we right back in. Hey, we back, everybody. Welcome back to the I've Been Falsely Accused radio show, part 21 with me, your host, Cogee, and Mr. Jeffrey Deskovic. And we got Miss Sheila Rule, who's in with us, and she's the co-founder of Think Outside the Cell Foundation, who's definitely doing a great job. Sheila, thank you again.
Thank you.
All right, I want to ask you before that. Okay, now, this person does everything they can do, getting their schooling and everything they can do in prison. They go up in front of the board flops them and says, no, you got to go back. Now, like you said, when you go back, what more can I do? And what did I do wrong when I thought I done everything right and I stayed out of trouble? So where does a prisoner go from there, Ms. Rule?
Well, that's a great question, because I think for some, they don't know what to do. Some give up. It's not that they act out or anything, but there's a sense of hopelessness because they're not. It's not only them that they want to come home for. They want to come home for their families. So you have families. You have children who've been waiting for years.
That's right.
And it's a hard thing. Sometimes families eventually fall apart. They don't. People move on, and so it can be a really not only frustrating but a lonely experience. Other people stay the course. They just say, "Well, I know I've done all I can. Maybe the next time." And I think one thing to be clear about is that people in prison in New York State, they know the deal. They know how the parole system is broken. They know that, so that, a lot of them, even though hope is what keeps all of us going, and so they do have that hope, but they are also realistic. They know what they're up against. They know what they're dealing with. And for others become activists, so that we've got people who are incarcerated who are part of the parole reform campaign, because they know that what happens with that campaign can have a dramatic impact on what happens to them when they go up for parole. So, people own that experience in a range of ways. I know people I'm thinking of two people in particular who they had done everything. They'd gone to college. They'd taken the college courses. Some had gotten their masters. Others, had started really terrific programs. Some people have gotten rave letters from the superintendents, and some states call it the warden, the prison warden. They've gotten great letters from former parole commissioners. They still get denied. So it's like, okay, this is crazy. Everybody knows it's crazy.
Yes, ma'am.
Let's all work together to change it.
That's right. Now, we down to 4 minutes real quick. Okay. Jeffrey, I want you to take a minute of it real quick. You said you got flopped when you went up for parole. Tell us about that real quick.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the reasons why parole reform speaks to me. I consider that I was victimized by that. But basically, Cogee, I went there, and and the parole board's decision, turning me down, they acknowledged that I had a excellent educational record, that I had a good disciplinary record, that I had some letters of support, that I even had a letter from prison chaplain urging that I be paroled. So I had an associate's degree. I had all kinds of certificates, and I felt like I was an ideal candidate, but yet I was turned down. And when I wrote the parole officer of the facility after I was turned down, asking what is it I could do between now and my next parole appearance to make it next time, I was told that the parole board does not give out directions as to prisoners as to what they can do to make parole the next time out.
Okay. All right. So thank you, Jeffrey. Ms. Rule, I want to ask you a question real quick. We're down to 3 minutes. Can you give your website and give everything where you can be found real quick?
Yes, thank you. Our website is thinkoutsidethecell.org. That's thinkoutsidethecell.org.
All right. Ms. Rule, have you enjoyed yourself today?
I have thoroughly enjoyed myself, and I just thank you for allowing me to talk about these very, very important issues. I think that the more we talk about it and the more people hear about this, the more we are apt to bring about the change that is called for.
Yes, ma'am. And I definitely want to thank you, too. And I think you're doing a great job. And, you know, I think with me, you and Jeffrey and everybody that's doing it, because one thing you know for a fact, me, you and Jeffrey can't do it by ourselves. There's no way in the world we can do it by ourselves. So I want to thank everybody who's helping us to put a brick in the wall, you know what I'm saying, to build a solid wall, you know what I'm saying, to try to stand firm, you know, for these inmates, especially the people who don't deserve to be in there. I mean, like you said, the ones that's in there and they already done everything they can do and they are low risk, you know, to the community, why not let them out?
That's right.
Why not let them out and let them have a life again?
That's right. If the risk is low, let them go.
Yes, ma'am. Words of encouragement real quick, Ms. Rule.
To achieve greatness, start where you are, use what you have, do what you can, and we can accomplish miracles.
Yes, ma'am. You're right about that. Well, like I said, I want to thank you, and we're going to be bringing you back through the show, me and Jeffrey, because we got some special edition shows that me and Jeffrey are setting up that we're going to do, where we're going to have certain people to come through, where we really going to make a point. You know what I'm saying? The people that's really in the fight. We need the dog fighters, the people that's really in the dog fight.
That's right. That's right.
Yes, ma'am.
Count me in.
Yes, ma'am. You know, we definitely got you in. So we want to say much love to you. We love you. Thank you for coming through. Stay in the fight. Jeffrey, what you want to say real quick to Ms. Rule?
Sheila, what is the innocent prisoner's dilemma? 20-second answer as it pertains to parole. What is the innocent prisoner's dilemma?
When the innocent person goes before the parole board, they ask the innocent person, do you feel remorse? Remorse for what? He or she didn't commit the crime. But the parole board says, well, you don't show remorse. You're denied parole. What is an innocent person to do?
That's right. And once you say remorse for what, goodbye.
That's right.
Back to your cell. That's right. So we definitely going to talk about that. We're on short time. Much love to you. And thank you again for being on.
Much love to you. Thank you.
All right. Have a good one.
You too.
So everybody, that was Miss Sheila Rule. She's the co-founder of Think Outside the Cell Foundation. Please support her and check up on her. And like I said, let's do our part to bring people home. We'll be right back, and we want y'all to get ready for our next guest.